Hello and welcome. Are you guys ready to get your goof on? Today we're going to be talking about an extremely goofy movie. An extremely goofy movie was released onto video in 2000. Now, I always thought it was a theater release and then just came out on VHS afterwards, especially with how much they promoted it. But it never was, and I wanted to try to stay focused on theatrical releases, otherwise there are a ton more straight-to-video Disney films that don't really need to be talked about, but this is the exception because this film is actually pretty good and this one deserves to be talked about. We have the exact same cast back as well. So Bill Farmer, Jason Emerson, Rob Paulsen, Pauly Shore, Jim Cummings, etc. Everyone is back for the most part. And the gang is now going off to college.
See ya!
Goodbye, my little college man.
And going for the extreme adventure. Let's do it!
So all that build-up that we had talking about Roxanne and Stacy in the first film, how they were the best of friends and that Max had this huge giant crush on Roxanne and wanted to make sure that he got his date with her and was so upset about this vacation. Yeah, she's never mentioned in this film at all. There's no existence of Roxanne in this film at all. Instead, Max and PJ and Bobby all are just excited about going to college, getting away from their families, and competing in the X Games. Because this was a gigantic advertisement for ESPN and the X Games.
Look, I talked to him and laid out all the ground rules. No interfering with the X Games practice, no hounding us about schoolwork, no coming into our room unannounced, and no acting like a father. Especially mine. He's got his life, I've got mine.
This was created back in '99, early 2000, and extreme sports were all the rage. I've mentioned this before when we talked about Brink. Extremeness. Everything had to be extreme, and this one's no exception. But the really fun thing I love about it is that we have our main counterculture of the 90s present, but as well as the 70s is present, because of the fact that Goofy ends up losing his job and has to go back to college to get a degree so he can get a job. There could be plenty of colleges that he goes to, but he picks the one that Max goes to, and we're just gonna go along with this plot device here. Goofy ends up meeting the librarian, Sylvia, and they hit it off and they end up dating each other, and both of them are both obsessed with their childhood. Which, I mean, look at us today. We're all obsessed with the 90s, so it makes total sense how realistic it is, especially today, that you are caught up in the past because, I mean, 90s media is still going strong and the 90s actually never left, honestly. I still stand by that. We've never left the 90s. The 90s was part of our culture and just we're back in the backseat for a little bit, but now they're full verse again. And so we have the 70s culture in the 90s culture together.
Hey, what's going on?
And I think that's what I remember more about this movie than anything else, is the plot, even though it is an interesting plot, and it's a nice extended sitcom in the sense where you just have that standard plot, and then you also have the guys trying to compete in the X Games, but then they also have the rival fraternity team that only wanted Max and no one else, and so now they're enemies because they didn't want to take all three guys compared to the one guy, and they end up competing as rivals. But then we also have the love story with Sylvia and Goofy. Disco culture was still a really big thing back in the late 90s, early 2000s, and I do remember more so the songs that they did with this. There was a band called Cleopatra. I actually had their cassette. I probably got their cassette because of this movie, because that's how I knew about them. That's how they were promoted through Disney Channel, because of their cover of the song. But they did a cover of Right Back Where We Started From, which is honestly still fantastic and it's still a jam and I will listen to it all the time. And they were a pretty good group. I really don't know what happened to them, and I feel like I need to look it up because I do remember them, and they had some really fun music videos. Overall, I still like the movie, and now that I have gone through college and have been through the experience, it's really great to relate to. It's really cool that we were able to relate to it as like children, but now you can look back and actually relate to it and compare your own experience to that experience. So I still think it's a really enjoyable movie. It still is a great sequel to the first film, and I like that it does give more of a realistic look at college. That of course you're gonna come of age, you're gonna make different hobbies, and you're gonna discover yourself and become a different person. And it's really truth to that. There's a lot of truth to that, so I do like what they did. It's short, it's sweet, but it's something enjoyable. Especially if you like the first Goofy movie, you'll definitely like an extremely Goofy movie. And tomorrow we're gonna continue on with some more high school antics and talk about Confessions of a Teenage Drama Queen. So you can stay tuned, and as always, I hope you have a magical day, and I will see you real soon.